Hello, hello, welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse. And before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British rail critics, and of course my underwater train finders. You are the reason why this content remains! And today, we are going to discuss more bad paleo art. I mean, not really bad art in the sense of artistic talent, just bad as in accuracy to the paleontological record. But again, to be fair, a lot of these were old. And back then, this is what, sometimes anyway, even paleontologists absolutely 100% believed. So here's 5 hilarious pieces of old paleo art part 4. But before we even begin on that, I have an honorable mention, which I've never done before, but it was imperative to me that you all see this. Because it's just... Okay. The reason I didn't give it a place is that, like, I didn't really have much to say about it. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that inaccurate to what we actually thought about dinosaurs at the time. I'm not even sure which species these are supposed to be because the picture's cut off. But I just love the expressive nature. He's... It's just funny to me. I just needed you all to see that. Alright, starting off with something a little minor. This is a painting, for one thing, and it's absolutely gorgeous. The artist's name is on it, Heinrich Carter, and I don't want to... I almost feel bad, actually, throwing shade at the accuracy here, because this is, like, a really good painting. Like, I actually legitimately love this piece. We have 2 ichthyosaurs, as well as what is supposed to be a mosasaur. Now, in terms of the ichthyosaurs, not that far off, actually. The ichthyosaurs are pretty spot on, for the most part. I really don't have much to say in the way of poor accuracy here. The mosasaur is what throws me off. I mean, they're underwater, which is good. That's already much better than a lot of ichthyosaur art I usually have to deal with. But the mosasaurs, what's with the neck? I don't think mosasaurs could arc their neck in this way. Furthermore, I'm pretty sure their necks weren't even this long. I mean, that's a pretty long neck for a mosasaur. She's almost trying to be a plesiosaur with that neck over there. The body's arched in a really weird way too. Again, though, the actual art itself is absolutely gorgeous. It's just, the mosasaur is, I couldn't ignore it. I was just like, wait, that's, no, I don't think that's how that works. Though admittedly, it does look like a scene right out of a prehistoric Little Mermaid, doesn't it? And I mean that in the best way possible. I finally got around to talking about one of these. One of these very, very specific Brachiosaur outlooks that is a very dated opinion that pretty much no paleontologist on the planet worth their salt actually believes anymore, because it's just wrong. See, there was a time when paleontologists in general were struggling with the notion that large sauropods like Brachiosaurus were, well, absolutely enormous, way bigger than any other land-dwelling animal that we're currently aware of. How in the world did they support that great weight? It was difficult for them to figure out, and in the modern day we've learned a lot of things about this, the fact that they could in fact support their weight, even without being in water. But back in the day, one of the theories was that the reason their necks were so long was that they actually just poked their heads out of the water, and they stayed in the water pretty much all the time in order to support their great weight. Because when you're in the water, well, animals in the water can get much larger due to the physics involved with water. All things considered, I do concede that, first of all, this art is actually very nice. Second of all, the theory itself wasn't that outlandish based on what they knew at the time. They were just trying to figure out how these animals lived, and it wasn't like this was the craziest notion in the world, but if you think about it, it does kind of have a lot of issues. For example, so I guess the baby brachiosaurs must live on land briefly before obviously going into the water as they get older, but then how do the brachiosaurs lay eggs? Do they lay them in the water and the babies swim? Or do they lay them on land? But if they lay them on land, that means they have to walk on land, which means they're capable of doing that. I mean, it's just one of many issues with this, because what if there's a dry spell? What if the lake or whatever they're in goes dry? What if the tide goes out? I mean, there's a lot of factors here to consider that really poke holes in how this could have worked. That being said, the actual design of the Brachiosaur isn't that far off based on what we know. My only complaint is that the tail is sitting on the ground. It's one of those old school tail dragging setups that a lot of dinosaurs were believed to have had when, well, honestly, basically none of them did that, ever. But the back going up, on an angle, being a bit taller in the front than it is in the rear, is pretty spot on. And the art itself, like I said, is actually very nice. It's just this idea of them dwelling in the water for pretty much their entire lives is wrong. We know it's wrong now, but back then it was a pretty dominant theory. Oh goody! One of these ones where there's a lot going on. Alright, so honestly, looking at this is Jurassic era. And I know that because there's actually no Cretaceous animals that I can pick out, at least not obvious ones. We have some nondescript pterosaurs. They have tails, though, which means they're not as nondescript as they usually are. They look like they could be Rhamphorhynchus, I'm gonna say. That's the best thing I got. I have no idea what you are. Oh, wait, I do! What are you doing here? Look at that! I almost didn't until I was actually looking at it really closely. This is supposed to be an iguanodon, and that's a problem, because you're not supposed to be here. Though, admittedly, iguanodon was late Jurassic and early Cretaceous, so I suppose it's not impossible? But it's pushing it. I believe this is supposed to be an apatosaur. You've got the tail dragon thing going on, that's wrong. There's a stegosaur down here, actually not looking that bad, all things considered. There's a lizard. No idea. And I don't know what these are supposed to be either. I guess they could be dinosaurs, or they could just be large lizards. It's kind of hard to say. You two! How dare you try to hide from me, Plesiosaurs? You think you can escape my wrath? What are you doing on land? What are you doing raising your necks? That is such a... No, no. That is not how you're supposed to be. Get back in the ocean and stop snapping your own necks. Plesiosaurs couldn't do that. All in all, though, not the worst we've ever seen, definitely. Oh my, no. I know what this is supposed to be. It's supposed to be a Ceratosaurus. It ain't. It's wrong. It's wrong in pretty much every conceivable way. There's another erupting volcano that, frankly, I'm surprised we dodged that this whole time, because usually that would have happened way sooner. Anyway, I think the biggest issue I have with the Ceratosaur opinion is, first of all, it's in that tripod stance. That is wrong. They would not have been this high up. Their tails would have been held out to balance out their front halves. They did not just waddle around with their tails on the ground. How are they ever going to catch food that way, I ask you? But my real big issue with this is the shrink wrapping is out of control. This animal is starving to death, like literally a day away from just keeling over from lack of sustenance. The artist must have been trying to display that because you can see the bare ribs, you can see the shoulder bones here. You can see the holes in the skull. You can really see where the animal's skull is supposed to be. This is actually one of the worst cases of shrink wrapping I've ever seen on a piece of Paleoart. Even Jurassic Park, which does shrink wrap at times, doesn't do it this bad, and their animals are in the right stance at the very least. This animal clearly has not eaten in a month, and I'm not even altogether sure it's still alive. Look at that glazed over black eye. It's just like, the world is ending. My life is forfeit. No food. No sustenance. Only silence. Okay, I'll be honest, when I first saw this before I read the text, I thought this was a completely wrong interpretation of another Dimetrodon. However, that was an incorrect assumption, as this is a completely wrong interpretation of a Spinosaurus! Which is even worse. This isn't even close, outside of the spine. This is one of the furthest interpretations I've ever seen from what a Spinosaurus is supposed to be. Although, to be fair, especially within the last couple decades, paleontologists aren't sure what a Spinosaurus is supposed to be. I swear that poor thing has had more revisions in such a short a span of time than any other dinosaur I've ever seen. It's ridiculous. I understand that paleontologists have to do a lot of guesswork in order to figure out how things should probably go together. And even with the best of evidence, we are talking about millions of years of time. Anyway, this isn't even close though. For one thing, the skull. The skull is what really gets me here. The stance in itself makes it look like a quadruped, but admittedly lately the Spinosaurus has been thought as to possibly be a quadruped, so I'll take it. But the head drives me nuts, because this is not a Spinosaurus skull at all. A Spinosaurus, what everyone is 100% sure of, is that the Spinosaurus had a long alligator or crocodile-like snout, much like Baryonyx or Suchomimus. That snout is actually one of the reasons why many believe it to be a more aquatic creature, often preying on large fish rather than land animals, although with its size it probably could have done that too if it wanted. This skull is not even remotely what a Spinosaurus should look like. As for the rest of it, the tail's being dragged, which is doubly annoying because this is supposed to be a quadruped, I guess. And what, does this thing run on all four limbs? Again, it honestly looks more like a Dimetrodon, and it would be a lot closer if it was supposed to be a Dimetrodon. But it's not. It's supposed to be the Spinosaurus. Also, I love it in these children's books, whenever they say what the Spinosaurus' sail was formed, because this one says it was to help the Spinosaurus lose excess heat. Thermoregulation is one of the theories regarding the sail, but I'll be real with you, paleontologists have no idea what that sail is for. Not a clue. Not one clue. They literally only have guesses when it comes to what that thing was actually for. I am sorry, Spinosaurus. I really thought we had you understood. And yet, we still don't. We have no idea what you were. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.